There were some very interesting games going on in the 1970s. Among other things, my cousin and I played some of the usual strategy games of the period, Risk and Acquire, and of course we were members of the chess club. There were some good times, and I still have the hardware to prove it. Once upon a time, there lived a guy named Walter J. Tchaikovsky. He was born in 1906 in Minneapolis, Minnesota. He spent most of his adult life there. He pursued a career in drafting and engineering. And in the 1940s and 50s, Mr. Tchaikovsky's name appeared on a series of patents for manufacturing machinery and processes. By the 1970s, he ended up in the Detroit suburb of Sterling Heights, Michigan. By that time, he was in his late 60s and decided to do some inventing of his own. And so, in 1971, he submitted a patent request for a three-dimensional board game apparatus. This patent focused on a method of fitting game pieces together in a unique way, and it included drawings for the design of three different games within the same patent: Crescendo Chess, Strato Tac-Tics, and Strato Checkers. Patent number 3751039 was issued in 1973. His company was called Strato Various Products, and although the corporate headquarters was listed as being in Sterling Heights, their manufacturing facility was actually in the neighboring suburb of Utica. And from that modest facility came a veritable work of art. And here it is. My pride and joy, Strato Tac-Tics. As described in their early advertising, Strato Tac-Tics is a game of mobility and power with a beautiful acrylic board and playing pieces. The pieces attach to each other with pegs in many directions, creating a three-dimensional playing area. Now, I never did acquire the pieces to play those other two games. Strato Checkers, it shows up on some of the online auction sites now and again. People seem to know the degree of rarity of the game. It's reflected in the prices. People are selling it for $100 or more. Pretty astounding when you realize that the original game sold back in 1972 for under $10. And I have never seen a copy of Crescendo Chess. I've seen pictures. I've read articles about it. It did find its way into the classified Encyclopedia of Chess Variants by D.B. Pritchard, but I have never seen it on an auction site. Strato Tac-Tics was always the flagship of the Stradivarius company, and that's really the subject of this video. Let's take a look at the rules. They were printed in this 20-page book. They're not really that complex. 20 pages is a bit overkill here, but then when you realize that there are some empty pages in the book, and about half of the book is taken up with the rules for Strato Checkers, which wasn't included in the copy of the game that I got. But by including the rules for both games in one booklet, they save some money that way, I'm sure. This is a setup for a four-player game. Now, since a four-player game is a little overwhelming, I think for the purposes of this instructional video, let's just use the two-player game. Ooh, trick photography. As you can see, the board is a 8x8 checkerboard, and in the center of each square, you've got a little hole there to peg your pieces. Each player gets a set of 12 pieces, and there's a little collection of pegs here that are used to position the pieces in some cases. This little carrying case didn't come with the game. I bought that to hold those pieces. Each player gets 4 kings, stylized cubes on a peg, and each one has 5 holes in it to peg other pieces into. Each player also gets 4 octons. The octon is technically a truncated cuboicosahedron, but it has 9 holes on it that can be pegged to other pieces. Each player gets 4 of these, which is called a spinner, and the spinner also has 9 holes, but it's oriented 90 degrees to the octon. And then finally, each player has a set of these 4 scorpions. It seems odd to me that they used scorpions instead of some geometric term, since everything else was kind of geometric, but be that as it may, they're called scorpions. So the objective of the game is to eliminate all of your opponent's kings. They've got 4 kings. You want to eliminate all 4 kings. Now, officially, the rules say an opponent's king is captured when a player forms a triplet, 3 of his pieces in an actual straight row with at least 2 positioned within the gold square at the center of the board. Now, in a 4-player game, that means that there's player elimination. As soon as your 4 kings are gone, then you're out of the game. You don't remove any pieces from the board. They remain in play, or in the way, I guess, in some cases. But you are out of the game, effectively. The last player to have a king or kings on the board is the winner of the game. All pieces move 1 square in any direction. That's pretty straightforward. So, for example, there's a legal move. There's a legal move. So far, so good. In addition to that, you notice that some of these are on a second level here. They can actually move on that level, for example, to here. Or this piece, for example, well, let's do this, can move up a level, like so. The upwards motion does not count as part of the turn. It's 1 space parallel to the playing surface, but up and down doesn't affect that movement count. Interesting thing here is if I want to move the lower piece out from under this one, it's pinned. They can't move. Now the kings can move just like a regular piece if you want to move them out here, up and down, whichever. The problem is when they move off from their home row, they are susceptible to trapping by other player pieces on top of them when these little guys come into play. And here is a support peg. Like so. So now this is still on the second level, but this one's on the first level having been moved. Some might be tempted to move like so, okay, which puts that piece on a parallel. It's on the same layer as this one, and that's a legal move as long as it's directly over the top here. Could move this king, for example, upward, like so, as part of that forward move, and put it on the next level. In order to capture a king, you have to have a triplet, which is 3 in a straight row, and 2 of the 3 need to be inside this golden square right here in the center. I've got 3 in a row in a straight line. 2 of them are inside that golden square. So that means that one of these kings goes away, like so. Now on the other hand, I can also do a thing like this, and hopefully you can see that all right. I'll turn it around here so a little bit. And you can see that I've got a piece on the third level, piece on the second, piece on the first. 2 of them are above those golden spaces right there. So that means that I can take one of the white kings off of the board because of that configuration. Once they're part of a triplet like that, they can't be moved. They are permanently part of the fixture on the board. The pieces underneath them can't move, it's pinned. And sometimes you get some pretty convoluted sculptures going on here in the 3rd dimension, not unlike playing the good old-fashioned Star Trek 3D chess thing where you have to view the board from a certain way in order to get the effect of how a move works. This is kind of that same way. And it is possible to set up something like this. Now I've got all kinds of triplets going on in here. I've got this one, 1, 2, 3, and I've got this one, 1, 2, 3, and I got this one, 1, 2, 3, this way. 1, 2, I don't have one up there, but I could move into that space eventually. As long as 2 of these in this triplet are above the golden square, and 2 of these are above the golden square, they count separately. You can't do that in the same move, though. If I should happen to have this sort of a configuration and then this piece moves in there, then that only counts as one. I just choose which one I want to count. And a piece can move underneath another piece. If I have a support peg like I do back here, I want to move a piece under that, then I can remove the peg and move a piece under it like so. All other rules still apply. If it's pinned, it's pinned. If it's part of a triplet after that move, then it's permanently in that position for the rest of the game. Now these three vertically here are not a triplet because they're outside this golden triangle. If this whole stack of them was over here, it would be a triplet because at least two of them is inside that golden square. Now if by chance I move aggressively into this back square, I can do this on top of the king back here. That does not pin it because it's in its original space. But if that king had been out here, I could pin it in place so that it can't move. The king outside its home row acts just like a normal piece as far as it can be part of a triplet. It can move as a normal piece, but it's still a king. And so when the kings are eliminated, the first tier is the kings that are still in their original home position. They go away. The second tier are kings that are in play outside their home position. The third tier are kings that are part of a triplet. They still go away. And that's the only time that a piece in a triplet can be moved. And if it's underneath another piece, it gets replaced by a peg, so it stays elevated. In a four-player game, because the board is more crowded, there may be cases where there's no place to move. In that case, the player just passes their turn. Positions will open up eventually to allow a move. Now, for two players, there's a couple of restrictions. For instance, vertical movement can't go above this third level for a two-player game. For a four-player game or a three-player game, it's unlimited. And there are some other restrictions as far as pegability, meaning that the holes between two pieces that are next to each other need to align. I remember back in the day when we used to play this that we decided the pegability was a good idea. It put more restrictions on the moves, but it required the players to think ahead a little bit further and to look more carefully at how they configure their pieces on the board. And it sort of takes the game into more of a strategic realm and not so much a competitive puzzle. And another advanced rule gives the scorpions some powers. They have the power to actually capture a piece and take it out of play. It's just so beautiful. I mean, even if the game is broke or the game is boring, it just looks cool. It looks really neat sitting on the coffee table. These bright, shiny plastic pieces, very space age. It looks to me like something they might have on the Orville.
Oh, baby, this is what we signed up for.
There's nothing like it, that's for certain. Well, thanks again for tuning in. I appreciate you being here. Appreciate your support. I hope you enjoyed this nostalgic look at one of my old favorites here. And thanks, of course, to Walter J. Dukowski for coming up with this game. And if you could just do me one more favor, be sure to play every day. Man, that's one big whopping box, isn't it? Looks kind of like it's been through a storm or something. It's only 50 years old.